Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. You know, today's show is going to be very impactful and very interesting because we have a very creative and industrious guest. Lynette Eddy is the creator of the Open Heart Mindfulness approach to life. OHM, Open Heart Mindfulness, is a mind management practice that provides steps to live a life well lived. She earned a master's degree in social work from the University of Nevada, Reno, and is founder of the Eddy House, which serves thousands of at-risk and homeless youth in northern Nevada. Lynette Eddy serves homeless and at-risk youth with housing, food. The Eddy House does this with housing, food, training skills. And in fact, this is very cool. Eddy House has been declared by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to be a national model for serving at-risk youth. Today, Lynette and I will focus on the teachings of her new book, The Fight Inside, Winning the Battle Between Your Ego and Your True Spirit. So with that, let's welcome author, entrepreneur, and humanitarian Lynette Eddy. Lynette, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad. As usual, I had my pre-call, and I was so excited by the pre-call. You know what I'd like to do? I think since we've talked about open heart mindfulness, and which is OHM for short, can you give me a brief overview on what OHM is?
Sure. It goes down to the concept of our thoughts and how our thoughts determine our choices, our actions, and the direction our life will take. And you think of it that way. Our thoughts are everything. There's a lot of depression, anxiety in today's society, and if we could better manage our mind, manage our thoughts, we would save ourselves from a lot of psychological suffering. Really unnecessary.
Yeah, especially negative thoughts, right? And those self-flagellating thoughts that we think of ourselves as less than. Aren't those the ones that are really destructive?
Right. And so I did some research on this, and the average person has about 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those are negative. And a lot of these negative thoughts are worry thoughts, and say like 10% of the things we worry about actually happen. So think of all the necessary, psychological suffering we put upon ourselves. So I did some investigating, and from personal experience, I lost my husband to suicide, and I watched how his thoughts became very self-destructive, and when he was suffering, obviously. When he passed away, he left a note. It said, "I can't live with myself any longer." And not too long after, I happened to hear something that Eckhart Tolle had written, and he was about to end his life. And he said, "I can't live with myself any longer." I said, "Whoa, that's the same thing that my husband said." Then Eckhart said that he examined that statement. He said to himself, and he said, "Well, I can't live with myself. There must be two of me. What is the I and what is myself?" Came to a conclusion that the I is his true self, and the myself is his false self.
I love that.
Ego.
Yeah, I love that concept, and we certainly want to get into true self and false self, and as we the ego is a prime determinant in how we think about the false self or the small self. And tell me, I think, if you don't mind, I'd like to probe a little bit into your husband, and you noticed, and you made the observation, you had been married 34 years, and you made the observation that your husband was in pursuit of more, pursuit of whatever more was. Enough wasn't enough, and he was extremely successful in business, extremely successful in a number of areas of life, and yet he felt incomplete. He felt that he couldn't live with the behaviors that led him to pursue those goals. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So, well, when I dove into what the ego is about, there are traps that identify in OHM, and one is never enough. And he definitely had that mentality towards the end. But when we were first married, he lived a simple life. He was compassionate. He loved nature. He meditated. And he was at peace with himself. And then he got into, finance, big finance. He started making a lot of money, and it was people he was associated with, and it all became, have to have more money and more possessions and status. And I kind of watched that happen, and he just wasn't the same person. He was anxious, just never at peace with himself. And then, and then it led to a lot of destructive behavior, like gambling, and then I found out later he had girlfriends and just a secret life. And I was just like, whoa, what happened? And at the time, I was finishing my master's degree in social work, and I tried to diagnose him with the criteria from the DSM. It's kind of like a psychiatrist's Bible to diagnosing clients. And I couldn't find anything. He didn't, the definition of depression or bipolar or anything like that. I just knew he had just lost himself. And that's when I really explored how these negative self-destructive thoughts took him over. And that's when I, it was not enough, never enough, comparing yourself with others. He just, he lost that sense of himself, which I call the spirit. And, that's really a hard concept to define in our language. It's, it's been called like soul, higher self, consciousness. I just call it spirit. It's that thing in us. We all have it. Some people just get covered up by the ego. We lose touch with it. And to live authentically in this life, we have to stay in touch with our spirit. It's that one solid thing that keeps us out of going down that rabbit hole of self-destruction. And and I see it in our society today. It's like we live in an egoic society with all the consumerism and disconnection, and we're starving for a spirituality that he can't find. We're losing it because of the systems, institutions we live by. But in my book, I write how we better get it together and get our spirits, because it depends on the future of the planet. I mean, our ego-based, we're dominating Mother Nature and using all the resources for greed and whatever. But we've got to put it together and get more spiritually based and realize we're part of Mother Nature and we're all connected.
What role, and I don't want to get too deeply into the psychology of it, but what role does our childhood play in this?
It's a big piece, and that's in the book I describe how we have the traps of the ego, and I break them down so we can recognize them when they show up, in ourselves. The other part of it is trauma and things that happened when we were conditioned from birth, and that has a huge impact on our thoughts. And trauma is the only way to get around it is through it. You have to, I call it a wound, these shadow sides of ourselves, wounds we have buried deep. And, we can recognize that if something triggers us, we're just like, whoa, where'd that come from? You need to just stop. You need to recognize the feeling. I call it, I have an acronym called REAL.
Yeah, and I want to get into that in a bit. So we're going to focus a lot of time on REAL. So
trauma, that's a beast.
Is it
it's not fun to?
Is trauma related to shame? Do the two go hand in hand?
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And shame is the ego has a party on that one. It will, just tell you you're worthless and how could you do? It's definitely tied to shame. And at Eddy House, we have a lot of the kids, like majority of the kids have all been in the system or whatever, the foster system or whatever, but they've had trauma from early age. And what we work with them on a trauma-informed care model, and that is we really get down to the core of what happened. We say, like, what happened to you, not what's wrong with you. We try to separate that and take the blame out, the shame out. I've had kids say, well, did drugs more, she wanted to do drugs, it was more important than taking care of me. And then that gets internalized, and we try to unravel that and things like that. We all have it.
Are you kidding? You're preaching you're preaching to the choir. To the
all have something in
downtrodden choir. I want to briefly just kind of define the ego and the true spirit. And I told you my definition. Ego is much more. It's very elaborate, and I have this little my 3 P's I called of ego, and I'm wondering what you think about it. And it comes from our neediness, and it comes from our negative self-talk and the criticisms and comparisons and evaluations, and we end up with an egoic need of power, prestige, and possessions. And we have the feeling that once we are in control, and once we are accepted by some kind of group of people, or once we own things, I know you talk about cars, and once we own things, we're going to be okay. But those are so superficial, and they're so temporary that they really can't fill the need. So it is a never-ending regressive spiral in a hole. And I would like your thoughts on ego and why it is so damaging in the psyche of all Americans, but we're finding it, as you were talking about, we're finding it in youth as well. So could you tell me a bit about ego?
Well, yeah, like when I first started researching this, I went back to Freudian definition, but that's outdated. That was like mommy issues and this and that, but that's way outdated. And then Jung came in with the shadow side, and then transpersonal psychology started focusing more on thoughts, and mindfulness is becoming mainstream right now.
Mm-hmm. Much more.
Right. So if we can understand our thoughts, the egoic thoughts versus the thoughts that come from our true self, our spirit. So the egoic thoughts, you just never have enough. Ego does not want you to feel peace. So it will just try to disrupt every situation it'll just throw these self-doubt into whatever you're doing, or insecurity, or we all have these thoughts, but never enough. That's an interesting one. I tell the kids at the house that the richest man in the world or woman could be on a yacht and out in the ocean. You would think would be so happy, but they could be more miserable than someone that's in solitary in jail. It's all about managing your thoughts. And, we even mentioned this together, Charlie. We were talking about Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, and he found joy and peace just looking out of a window in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And it's just finding that sense of self and looking at sunset, or hearing music, or meditating, or being in nature. There's just you can tap into it in certain ways, but the ego just jumps in there.
Yeah. and the ego, the ego is temporary fixes, that they are,
absolutely,
they work immediately, but then in the longer term, and it's really in the shorter term, not in the longer term,
right?
They're
and
never enough. They're never enough. That I need, as you talk about more. There's a book that I'm really interested. I haven't read. It's called The Molecule of More, and it's about dopamine. And it's about how, we will pursue dopamine rushes. And when we don't have a dopamine rush, it's sort of a depression, and we seek ways that we can get something new, something interesting, something who knows, that gets us rush. And it's one of the prime causes of addiction. And the ego is demanding these dopamine rushes. Let's look at the other side. How do you define a true spirit? Because I love that idea. I love the idea of that we move beyond, we move outside of ourselves into sort of a cosmic perspective. Do we not?
Yeah, it's I try to tell the kids, try to define this concept, which is so hard. I tell them, it's like telling someone what chocolate's like, but you don't know until you taste it. It's really hard to define in language, but it's, all the cells in our body, everything when we're born changes out to when we're older. As we are totally different physical beings, when we're 60 than we were when we were 5. But the spirit stays there. That spirit is that solid thing that you have your entire life. And it's that solid base. And, intuition, that's a sign of spirit. If you follow your intuition, if you don't, it's kind of like that's ego blocking it out. I can get really into the cosmic connection when I think of harmony, nature, and supposed to be at peace. And when we're in our true spirit, we do feel love, we feel peace, and that's, I believe, Mother Nature, or the way it's supposed to be. We have this egoic little monster. Just won't leave us alone. But we have to learn to control it, like, hey, I'm in charge, not you.
When we first talked, you said that your approach, I don't know if I have this correct, that if it's your approach, but you talked about the integration of Eastern spirituality and Western psychology. And I think there's so much to that, because in Eastern spirituality, and as is becoming more common with Western spirituality, with Western psychology, is the place of the ego. The ego is starting to emerge. People are understanding the ego, although I think it's still a very small percentage of the population, but it is much more than it ever has been. And you, Lynette, we have not even spoken of the entrepreneur and the creative side of you, that you have created an amazing process, methodology, and physical structure sort of piece, or sort of thing, that's called Eddy House. And before we get into how you deal with the at-risk youth in Eddy House, I'd like you to tell me about Eddy House.
Well, after my husband passed, I really had to reinvent myself.
And what year was that? What year was that, Lynette?
2010.
Okay.
And I knew I was pretty much stripped down to the core of my being. I had to rebuild. I didn't have to. There was a choice, and I'll tell you, it felt kind of enticing to just hang it up and just be like, I'm just done, and go into the victim thing.
Yeah.
That's a big one the ego does too, like in the victim seat. But I just pulled out my spirit, and I said, I'm going to do something really positive out of this. And I had life insurance money, and I had my degree, and I said, okay, I use this money, I'm going to make something happen. And I had done an internship working with the homeless, and I saw so many homeless youth on the streets in Reno, and I was pretty much shocked. There were no services for these kids. They were living basically in the shelters with the older homeless who were preying on them. So I slept out on the street, actually, for a couple of nights with just my sleeping bag, ate in the soup kitchen, and really saw what go through and what they need. So I just pulled some friends together and my son, and we just figured it out, like, how do you start a nonprofit? We were Googling, like, we need a 501c3 or whatever.
Yes, I understand. I've been a part of a startup nonprofit, so I understand what that's all about.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. But we figured it, it just progressed, and then we opened started with a home for aged out foster boys.
Aged out, can you define what that means? Because our audience won't know.
It's when they turn 18, they're emancipated from the system.
Okay, so they can no longer be a foster child to be part of the system. They're just out there in the streets.
Right. And, literally, a lot of times they're just with a trash bag of their clothes, that's their possessions, and, hey, have a nice life. It's just, like, heartbreaking, and most of them end up homeless. And so then that progressed to a drop-in center. Oh, my God, like hundreds of homeless kids. And we had food, showers. We had all their basic needs that we could meet them at the drop-in center. But we also started incorporating supportive services. We'd have a lot of counseling, which they desperately needed. We had, and we would work on getting their GEDs, and then writing resumes and getting, connecting them with job opportunities.
That's amazing.
And,
That's amazing. That just
how to manage their money. Yeah.
And what I'm surprised at. You started this in 2011, right? So we're really talking in a decade. You have built a house that I think you said is 18,000 square feet, and you're serving thousands of youth. And HUD has named you as a national model for what serving at risk youth would look like. That's Lynette. That is amazing. I can't. You are a woman that gets things done. If you can do this in a decade, that's really a short period of time.
Thank you, Charlie. But it wasn't just me. We have
of course.
Staff. We have now we have an executive director who's amazing. The community had pulled that. Community pulled together. And we collect data all the time, so we know exactly, what programs work, which ones don't, and we, track success. And HUD was impressed by that. And this is so important because this vulnerable age, 18 to 24, that's the age group we work with, and we, research, studies have found that if you don't intervene at that vulnerable age, most likely they'll be homeless for the rest of their life. And social and economic costs of that are huge for every community. So, that's important.
Yeah, you gave me a statistic that I found. I'm looking in my notes now, and I'll just go from memory since I can't find it in my notes. But you said of the homeless population, the fastest growing people group of the homeless population in the United States are youth. Is that right?
That is in Nevada.
Oh, that's in Nevada. Okay.
Right. They're starting to find now that seniors overall, it's becoming they're becoming a major.
What is going on,
major
Lynette?
part of homelessness.
What is causing this?
Well, a lot of addiction, mental illness.
Yes.
And now with seniors, it's our egoic social systems. We don't take care of each other. And even with when I see I've had many homeless friends that I've gotten to know, and they'll tell me people spit on them. Just come up to them and say, "Get out of town, you lazy, whatever."
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking. And I go even last week I was out at the camp. A lot of these people, and no one wants to be homeless. There is that small segment that they just pretty much choose it. But what happened to them to get them to that point? And though there is a segment that I'm not sure if you can help, but I hate to say that, but majority of these people, they desperately need, psychological interventions, a lot of serious mental illness, schizophrenia, serious bipolar. How are you going to progress in your life when you're, trying to survive? And it's that Maslow's law, you have to have your basic needs met before you're going to, move up and improve your life. And, that's why we have a housing first model at Eddy House, which is, just get under a roof, get in a safe place, and work on everything. But I'm hoping housing first model will, become more mainstream around the country.
Yeah, we have one in Orange County that we financially support, that we're really strong. Lynette, you have now, is this, you have a process that may or may not impact severe psychological issues, but you have a process that's practical, that's a brilliant process that you call REAL, R-E-A-L. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to spend the next half of our podcast talking about that. And I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will come and we will talk about REAL. Is that okay?
Oh, great.
Okay. Hi there, you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and I am with my very special guest, Lynette Eddy, who is focuses on winning the battle between the ego and the true spirit. And she focuses this right now on at-risk and homeless youth. And she has a place called Eddy House that she not only provides shelter, food, but she provides training, and she has a training process that she uses the acronym REAL, R-E-A-L, and I found this to be extremely helpful. So, Lynette, I would like you to give us the breakdown on what REAL is all about.
Sure, Charlie. Well, with the, I use this on the kids at the Eddy House, and what I try to emphasize is how important it is to learn to manage their mind. And many of them have self-destructive thoughts, and just their mind, just out of control with telling them that they're worthless and this and that. So we try to get them to be the witness of those thoughts. Now, that's a heavy concept, but tell them, don't just believe in all these thoughts that go through your mind like clouds going through the sky, and it just question them. When they come by, notice them, and then know them for where they're coming from. Are they coming from your ego or your true spirit? And if they're coming from your ego, you need to let them go. So I developed this acronym called REAL, and I tell the kids, okay, so you feel disturbance, something's off, you're just not feeling right, something's off in your head, you're feeling negative, you're starting to judge or whatever, you're just off. I say just recognize disturbance. Then E, examine what's going on. What egoic trap is pulling you in? Or is it you're getting triggered from past trauma? Explore, I tell them, just explore that. Where is that coming? Is it from you getting a sense of rejection from the past, or, whatever? And then acknowledge thoughts, a place of compassion. Don't be down on yourself, or no, I shouldn't be thinking this or whatever. Just acknowledge it, a place of compassion, and understand what these thoughts are about. And then just let it go. And the kids they practice this. I've heard stories how it's worked for them in different situations, and it's helped me quite a bit. I mean, an example is if someone looks at you funny or something, or acts kind of like mad at you or whatever, and you just assume oh my God, did I do? Or it must be me, they don't like me, or and then you go down this rabbit hole and it ruins your whole day. And it's just like, really? You find out later that you just had a fight with their partner or something. That's just one small example, but like I said, the most prominent traps are, with the not enough. And just if you're in your true spirit, you will be like, okay, I am enough. I'm worthy. I don't need things to make me whole. I don't need drugs to make me whole. I am enough. And then, stop comparing yourself. And with the young people, this is huge with social media.
Oh,
always
terrible.
Comparing themselves with others.
Yeah.
And that's why you see the rise in depression, anxiety with the young kids. I mean, they're always like, well, look at all the posts. They're all happy and living the life. And what's wrong with me? It must be me. It must be me. And I'm like, hey, guys, no. Everyone, we all have our, we don't post when we're, in our darkest times,
Unfortunately,
and
we should.
Yeah. Right. It's like we all trying to have this image of this perfect life we have or whatever, and it's such BS. No, that's not a cuss. But it's just BS. And if everyone were just more real with each other, I think we wouldn't feel so separate from each other and isolated. And that's huge in our society today. I mean, you see these mass shootings or everything. It's just like everyone's so isolated. We're not connected. Our sense of community is gone, and that has to come back if we're going to survive as a species.
Yeah,
all right, I'm sounding really doomsday, but I'm pretty convinced that's where we're heading if we don't get back into our true spirit, and then the collective spirit will take care of the planet.
I think your process is it resonates with Alcoholics Anonymous. That this is sort of the process of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think it's a process of a lot of therapy that we need to call it as it is, examine it, ponder it, and once we do that, acknowledge, yes, I have fallen prey to this, but this is not the truth, and if I hold on to this truth, it's going to be destructive for me. It's going to take me into places that I don't want to go, and that's why I think you suggest let it go and move on to something healthier. What would be the counter to real, not just letting it go? What would my life look like if I am real?
Well, you'd have more peace. And, we were talking earlier about those quick fixes that we're all looking for, the little sugar rush or whatever, to make us feel happy. It's an artificial happiness. If we can control these traps, then we can have more equanimity. We can be more at peace with ourselves, and that's what we really want. We don't want these highs of happiness. I mean, that's pleasure. It's not true joy. True joy is peace.
Pleasure and joy. That you make a distinction between the two of those.
Right. Pleasure is just short lasting. Buying new things or doing drugs or whatever. That's just short. But lasting joy, that's when you are at peace.
Now, you said that your students in Eddy House are very fond exercising your acronym REAL. What is that? So obviously this has resonated with this people group, that I need to think better, think differently, and then allow my inner self to deal with it. Am I catching that right?
Exactly. You can see a lot of improvement in their emotional regulation. A lot of them come in, they're just like, they get angry in 2 seconds, out of control or whatever. And, when they begin the process to really self-reflect and think about their thoughts and where they're coming from and understanding the mechanics of their mind a little better. And, it's hard. They're at a young age. I mean, it's hard at any age, but once they get a handle on that, they sit back. If they start feeling pissed off or whatever, take a moment. They step back, get in that witness seat, and they're like, okay, where is this coming from? And, acknowledge it and figure it out, and then they let it go. I mean, if there's a reason for them to, be not happy about the situation, or someone did something to them, we'll deal with it in a much more, appropriate way.
How long is how long are your
it's just one
trainings on
example.
this? Is this a couple days, couple months?
We have the drop-in center, and we get all the kids that just come off the streets, and then we have maybe, I think it's 40 beds for the kids that live there. We also have shelter beds. We have kids that can come in, and we have a ton of cots, and they can stay overnight. But if they want to go into our call it the community living program, can stay in our program. But no matter what, whoever is at Eddy House at any given time, we have groups scheduled, and I do this mindfulness group, and so with the open heart mindfulness. So is
that a large group? Is that an intimate group?
It's pretty large. It's depends on how many of the. Hopefully, we have youth that are out working and school, but we have usually I'll have I've had up to 50 kids in.
Oh my goodness! Seriously.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, this is an intimidating crowd. I mean, it's so funny though, because I walk in and I start, and I'm expecting they're going to have their phones in their face and a lot of attitude and that, but I just hit them right away, and they are just, and they ask questions, and we openly talk about how they're trying to get a grip on their self-destruction and that, and it's really helped. It's really helped.
And at the end of the day, as we're wrapping up our show here, at the end of the day, it all comes back to that battle between the ego and the true spirit, does it not? Is that not sort of the core of the issues?
Absolutely. I truly believe it. And I tell the kids that. I'm like, because some young kids had asked me, I told the kids, I was out at a park, and these young kids, we were just talking. They're like, can you tell me what a good life is? Because I'm older, and it's like, they were just like, what would you say, how to live a good life? And I was like, oh, do the right thing, get your degree, blah, 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 all that stuff everyone tells you. And then I thought later, no, you should have told them, manage your thoughts, manage your mind. That is the key. I mean, that's everything. It's everything. We can't manage our thoughts. Yeah.
It's thoughts, the comparative thoughts of negative self-image, and that those are not who you are. Those are markers of your brokenness, that you've lived under this broken model, and yet there is a way to, an alternative to this broken model, which is recognize, examine, acknowledge, and let it go. I'm a big fan of real. And so when they begin to control that, they begin to see, do they not, that they have agency in their life, that they have more control in their life than they think they do.
Exactly. And that's huge. That's huge, because we all have a choice. We don't see it a lot of times, Like, that's why we have the depression rates are way up, anxiety, suicide.
Oh my goodness, especially these days. Yeah.
Yeah. If only we did more self-reflection and got into our true spirit and just tapped into it to each live a joyful life and collectively make positive changes in the world. Yeah.
You know, as I'm thinking, Lynette, this is not limited to indigent youth and at risk and homeless. This is an American problem. This is something, as with your husband, it is something that we as adults all face. And there are times when we think, do I matter? Am I good enough? What does the world think of me? Because we are brought up in an age, in a spirit of competitiveness and comparison. And then we live in this now, our poor kids live in this social media world that is just a total fantasy world, and yet it's taken as reality. I think you offer so much. You know, I really would like to recommend your book to our listeners, The Fight Inside, Winning the Battle Between Your Ego and Your True Spirit. I think, you know, we have focused on children here, but this is for everybody, no matter how old you are. I'm 73 and I'm still learning this stuff and still, you know, working on, if perfecting is the right word, but perfecting my core inner self. And you know, for those that are in the spiritual tradition, you know, in my spiritual tradition of the Christian mystics, you know, this is a major message. And as I was explaining to you, we are looking at love and kindness and acceptance, and we're looking for, as you would put it, we're looking for collaboration with the cosmos, collaboration with the way things are created. And in my paradigm, things are created by an ontology or agency of God, which is the spirit of love. And it is a spirit of you are accepted. You know, you talked about that it's important to be accepted and to be significant. Well, how much more significant can you be than when you are at one with the divine, no matter how you define that divine, that you are at one with that and you have a source, an internal source that you can rely on. How do you feel about that?
Oh, well said, Charlie. That hits it. Yeah.
Well, Lynette, Eddy, thank you so much. You know, I'm going to put in my links. You know, we'll put the Eddy House and we'll put your book, and I'm going to put a donation thing that people can donate to the Eddy House because you're doing such profound work there, and we want to support you any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Well, thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
You know, I'm amazed.
Thank you for being you.
You know, yeah, it is what it is. I am just amazed at what you've done in a decade. You are with your team. I know you are such a humble woman, and you will give credit to your team and to all the people that have worked with you on this, but you have been the leader, and you are, in my mind, a godsend, and our world in the United States needs you and people like you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
All right, I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie, and until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.